Stay calm and regulate your tone is the most important first step because the way you say something often carries more weight than what you are actually saying. When an argument starts, emotions spike almost instantly, and the natural instinct is to raise your voice to match the intensity of what you are feeling inside. But this only fuels the fire and invites the other person to do the same, creating a cycle where neither side is truly listening anymore. Instead of reacting to the rush of adrenaline, train yourself to slow down your breathing, speak in a steady voice, and keep your tone measured even when you feel like shouting. This single choice sets the stage for the conversation to stay productive rather than destructive, and it signals to the other person that you are not there to fight, but to solve a problem together. The power of tone control lies in how it instantly changes the energy in the room. When one person stays calm, the other person feels less attacked and more willing to meet at the same level. It is almost impossible for someone to keep yelling when they are speaking to a calm and collected counterpart. This doesn't mean suppressing what you feel or pretending you are not upset. It means expressing those feelings in a way that doesn't make the other person shut down or prepare for a counterattack. A calm tone creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is what allows real communication to happen. When people feel safe, they stop defending and start explaining, which is where understanding begins. Another reason staying calm is so powerful is because it gives you the chance to choose your words more carefully. Words said in the heat of the moment cannot be unsaid, and they can do damage long after the argument is over. By keeping your tone in check, you give your brain time to catch up with your emotions, to select language that communicates the truth without unnecessarily hurting the other person. This keeps the argument focused on solving the issue rather than creating new ones that come from careless remarks. Even small shifts like lowering your volume or slowing down your speech can de-escalate a tense exchange and remind both sides that this is not a battle but a conversation. It is also helpful to notice your body language when you are staying calm, because tone is not just about the voice, but the entire presence you bring into the moment. Relaxing your shoulders, keeping eye contact without glaring, and avoiding aggressive gestures can support the calmness you are trying to convey. Often, an argument gets worse, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said, with tense posture, pointing fingers, or slamming hands on the table. By remaining physically open and grounded, you send a message that you are approachable and willing to talk rather than fight. This practice takes self-awareness and discipline, and that is why it is so effective. The person who can remain calm in the heat of conflict holds the power to guide the discussion to a healthier place. You are not letting the other person win by staying calm. You are protecting the relationship and preserving respect while still having your point heard. Over time, people notice that they can speak with you even about hard topics without fearing an explosion, and that builds trust and closeness rather than distance. Finally, remember that staying calm is not about denying your feelings, but about choosing the most effective way to communicate them. It is about shifting from an automatic reaction to a thoughtful response. When you focus on regulating your tone, you become the thermostat of the conversation, setting the temperature instead of just absorbing it. You keep the door open for understanding, for collaboration, and for finding a solution that works for both sides rather than walking away with regret and resentment that could have been avoided. Listen to understand, not just to respond, because most arguments spiral out of control when people feel unheard. When someone is upset, what they want more than anything is to know that their feelings are acknowledged and respected, even if you don't fully agree with their perspective. Too often, while the other person is speaking, we are already preparing our next point, waiting for a pause to jump in and defend ourselves. This creates a tug of war where both sides are more focused on winning than on connecting. Truly listening means putting aside the urge to interrupt, maintaining eye contact, and giving verbal or nonverbal cues that show you are paying attention. This kind of listening changes the entire direction of the conversation because it calms the emotional intensity on the other side. When someone feels heard, their defenses lower, and they no longer need to keep repeating themselves or raising their voice to get the message across. You can show that you understand by reflecting back what they said in your own words, not as a robotic repetition, but as a sincere confirmation that you are tracking their concerns. This can sound as simple as acknowledging their frustration, their disappointment, or the specific situation they are upset about. Active listening also helps uncover what the real issue is beneath the surface. Often, arguments are not really about the thing being discussed, but about unmet needs, hurt feelings, or fears that have been building up over time. By listening fully, you give space for those deeper layers to come out, which makes it possible to solve the real problem instead of just arguing about symptoms. You might realize that the other person is not angry about the event itself, but about feeling disregarded, dismissed, or disrespected, and that insight shifts the focus from blame to repair. Another benefit of listening to understand is that it creates room for empathy, which is the bridge that reconnects two people during conflict. When you put yourself in the other person's shoes and imagine how they must be feeling, it becomes harder to stay stuck in anger. Even if you disagree with their perspective, you can respect that it is true for them, and that validation alone often softens the tension. Empathy is not about agreeing. It is about showing that you care enough to consider their viewpoint seriously before defending your own. Practicing this level of listening also earns you the same in return. When people see that you are willing to truly hear them out, they become more open to hearing you. This turns the argument into a dialogue instead of a shouting match. It also shows maturity and self-control, qualities that strengthen relationships over time because they prove that disagreements can be handled in a way that leaves both people feeling valued rather than torn down. Listening to understand is a skill that grows stronger with practice, and it transforms the way arguments feel. Instead of being draining, they can become opportunities for connection, for clearing the air, and for strengthening trust. It slows the pace of conflict, reduces misunderstandings, and creates space for both sides to feel respected. When the goal is understanding first and response second, you keep the relationship as the priority and open the door to a resolution that works for everyone involved. Separate the person from the problem, because when you make the other person the enemy, the argument stops being about solving anything and starts being about winning. It is easy to slip into blaming language when emotions are high, throwing accusations like "you always do this" or "you never listen," but that only pushes the other person away and makes them defensive. When you separate the person from the problem, you shift the focus away from attacking who they are and put it on addressing what happened. This allows both sides to stay engaged in the discussion without feeling personally attacked, which is key if you want to preserve trust and respect in the relationship. When you focus on the issue instead of the individual, you make room for collaboration. It becomes about working together to fix something rather than fighting against each other. For example, instead of saying "you are so careless with money," you might say "our budget is getting tight and we need a plan to manage it better." The second approach invites teamwork and solution building, while the first one invites defensiveness and resentment. This small shift can completely change how the other person receives what you are saying because they no longer feel like their character is being judged. Separating the person from the problem also prevents you from stacking past mistakes on top of the current situation. When people start dragging in everything that has ever gone wrong, the conversation grows heavier and more hurtful than it needs to be. Staying focused on the single issue at hand keeps the argument cleaner and easier to resolve. It also shows maturity and respect because you are choosing not to weaponize old wounds. This creates a safer space for both people to be honest without fear that every past conflict will be reopened and thrown at them. Another powerful part of this principle is that it gives you the chance to see the other person as your partner rather than your opponent. Even if you are angry, you can remind yourself that this is someone you care about and that both of you are trying to feel heard, respected, and understood. When you mentally put the problem on one side and the two of you on the other side, you create a sense of shared purpose that turns the argument into a joint effort. This mindset leads to more creative solutions because you are thinking together instead of trying to outsmart or overpower each other. It is also important to be mindful of your language when separating the person from the problem. Choosing neutral, descriptive words rather than harsh labels makes a big difference in how the message lands. Saying this situation is frustrating keeps the focus on the event, while saying you are frustrating attacks the person. These distinctions may seem small, but they add up and determine whether the conversation becomes constructive or destructive. Finally, separating the person from the problem helps preserve the emotional connection that can easily get lost in heated moments. It allows you to disagree without disrespecting, to express frustration without shaming, and to stay close even when you are working through difficult issues. This approach reinforces that the relationship matters more than the disagreement, which is what allows it to survive conflict and even grow stronger after the tension is resolved. Use I statements instead of you statements because they change the entire tone of the conversation and prevent the other person from feeling attacked. When you say you always ignore me or you never help out, the other person's first reaction is usually to defend themselves, argue back, or shut down completely. This creates a wall between you and makes it harder to find any resolution. But when you say, I feel unheard when I'm speaking, or I feel overwhelmed when I don't get help, you shift the focus to your own feelings and experience, which no one can deny or argue against. This keeps the conversation personal but not accusatory, and it invites the other person to understand rather than resist. Using I statements is not about softening your feelings or avoiding honesty. It is about expressing them in a way that encourages connection instead of conflict. It allows you to be clear about what is bothering you without turning it into an attack on the other person's character. This style of communication is especially important in close relationships because repeated accusations can slowly chip away at trust and respect. By speaking from your perspective, you give the other person an opportunity to respond with empathy rather than defensiveness. Another advantage of I statements is that they make it easier to be specific about what you actually need. Instead of staying in general complaints like you never listen, you can say, I need you to put your phone down for a few minutes so we can talk. This gives the other person a concrete action they can take to make the situation better, which is far more productive than just pointing out what they are doing wrong. Specific requests make it possible to solve problems rather than just argue about them. It also helps regulate your own emotions when you frame things in I statements. Taking a moment to identify what you are feeling and why before speaking forces you to slow down and think about the situation with more clarity. This step reduces the chance of saying something impulsive that you might regret later. It also shows the other person that you are willing to own your emotions instead of placing all the responsibility on them, which often encourages them to do the same. This approach creates a safer space for the other person to share their side of the story. When people don't feel blamed, they are much more willing to open up and explain their actions or feelings honestly. This can reveal misunderstandings that would have gone unnoticed if the conversation stayed in a defensive cycle. The focus moves from who is right and who is wrong to how both people can understand each other better and meet each other's needs more effectively. Over time, regularly using I statements builds a pattern of healthy communication that strengthens the relationship. It teaches both sides to speak about issues respectfully and to listen without preparing a counterattack. It keeps arguments focused on feelings and solutions rather than insults and accusations. This practice does not make disagreements disappear, but it makes them far less damaging and far more likely to end in a way where both people feel heard, respected, and closer rather than pushed apart. Take breaks when emotions run high because no productive conversation can happen when both people are flooded with anger or frustration. When emotions peak, the brain shifts into fight or flight mode and logical thinking shuts down, which makes it almost impossible to respond calmly or listen clearly. In those moments, arguments tend to escalate quickly, words get harsher, and the chance of saying something you will regret grows much higher. Taking a break gives both sides a chance to calm down, reset their emotions, and come back with a clearer perspective. Pausing a conversation is not the same as avoiding it. It is a deliberate choice to protect the relationship and give it the best chance of a healthy outcome. Sometimes just stepping away for 10 minutes, taking a few deep breaths, or going for a short walk is enough to let the tension drop. The key is to communicate that you are coming back to the discussion and not walking away forever, because leaving without saying anything can make the other person feel ignored or abandoned. A simple statement like, "I need a few minutes to cool down," shows respect for both your feelings and theirs. Breaks also give you time to process what was said and think about what you actually want to express. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, you can reflect on why the argument triggered such strong feelings and decide how to share that without blaming or attacking. This leads to a much more constructive conversation when you return, because you are speaking from a place of understanding rather than pure emotion. Taking a pause is also helpful for the other person because it allows them to calm their own emotions. Even if you are ready to talk, they may still need time to settle, and forcing the discussion too soon can lead to another explosion. Allowing both sides the space to breathe shows patience and respect, which are essential for building trust. Sometimes people come back after a break and realize that the argument wasn't as serious as it felt in the moment, which can prevent unnecessary hurt. This practice can prevent a lot of long-term damage in relationships. Many people regret the things they said during the peak of an argument far more than the original issue that caused the fight. By taking a step back when things get heated, you are actively choosing to protect the bond between you from words that can't be taken back. This habit helps both people feel safer, knowing that even in moments of conflict, the relationship will not turn into a battlefield. Over time, making space for breaks during conflict teaches both sides emotional regulation and mutual respect. It creates a culture where cooling down before continuing is seen as a normal, healthy part of communication rather than a sign of weakness. Arguments become shorter, less damaging, and more focused on solutions rather than emotional outbursts. This practice allows the relationship to recover faster after disagreements and grow stronger because it shows that both people are committed to resolving issues without destroying each other in the process.